this next one, it's not only an A, it's definitely a Mount Rushmore. It must surely be, unless you're really going to surprise me, Bobby the Brain Heenan.
Yes, yeah, absolute A. Mount Rushmore candidate. Absolutely. What can be said? The Heenan family, and Heenan was the one that made Hogan what he was. Heenan's the one. Because the entire Hogan existence in the first world title run before DiBiase was, can this monster beat Hogan? It was Heenan was the heel against Hogan. And the avatars were all the wrestlers that went after Hogan. So essentially that angle was Hogan and Heenan, not Hogan and all the other guys.
Maybe with the exception of Andre.
But what got Andre to the point of turning heel?
Exactly.
Who is the one in Andre's ear? Who is the one that poisoned Andre's mind?
If people go back and actually watch like a year beforehand, it's so clever how they brought Andre back, because he was suspended and then he comes back as part of the Machines, and then I don't think there's any payoff where they unmask Andre, or maybe there is, I can't remember. And then he's suspended again, but then he comes back. And it's never explained why he comes back, because it was Bobby Heenan making the original complaint.
Yep.
And I don't even think they really explain it on TV, but if you look deeper into it, it's Bobby who's making the original complaint, and then all of a sudden he's back on TV, and then he aligns himself with Bobby Heenan. It's a really, really clever story.
That's your classic show don't tell. That's a classic show don't tell.
Next one, Francine.
Francine, I would say she made Shane add another layer to his heel character. She was excellent. She managed the pit bulls, and then we had the angle there. She did great work there. She was very green at the time. When you put her up against this list, I still got to give her a C, because she did become the head cheerleader with Shane. She added and got him more over. But when you put her up against the rest of this, it doesn't stand up. Right to censor Stevie Richards wouldn't even maybe touch the B category with all these names. I'm just putting context in here. I'm not even on this list, am I?
No, you were very much wrestler manager, so I sort of didn't really add you on. And
no,
also,
when I was fat, I couldn't
Stevie
wrestle.
Richards.
Couldn't wrestle when I was fat.
Marie.
A D. She got herself more over than anybody else. She was part of the act with Lance and Just Incredible with the Impact Players, but she got herself more over. She was basically like a Mark that wanted to be in the business, which was a great gimmick. But she got herself way more over. And then the whole thing in WWE with Al Wilson and Tori Wilson, I don't even know. She wasn't even a wrestler or a manager there. She was just a female character, right?
Yeah, basically. Now, these are a couple of new managers, if we can say that, even though they're older, both from the Four Horsemen. Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson, they both managed in AEW.
D for both of them. For the best of reasons. These guys can cut promos, make you, like Arn Anderson cut that promo on Cody Rhodes about the Glock and carjacking. And I was like, holy shit. I go, Arn's kind of scary, and I wouldn't want to fight that dude in a dark alley. That's not the point. You're supposed to get Cody over. Tully, the same thing, and we'll skip ahead. Trish as well was very half-dimensional. Trish Stratus is the next name. I give her a D because her body of work as a performer so far overshadowed. If she remained a manager, she wouldn't have reached her potential. So just very, very nothing. She didn't get Albert or Test over or any of the people she managed. She got herself over.
Sonny Onoo.
This is where it's tough because Sonny, did you ever interview Sonny?
No, I've met him, but never interviewed him.
Charismatic, can talk, can cut a promo, especially if he's trying to kind of rib or razz somebody or whatever, or if they poke at them. That never came across because he did the camera gimmick in WCW with Ultimo Dragon and all these other things. There were so many more things they could have did with Sonny. So I put him as a C. He fit with the gimmick that he was managing, but they never gave him the exact character to maximize that. So it wasn't his fault. So I give it a C.
Rico Constantino. He's an interesting one. He was a manager wrestler, but when I think of Rico, I err towards manager.
Especially Billy and Chuck and the wedding and all
Yeah,
that stuff. He's back in AEW doing it. Was that a one-shot deal? I hope
a
not.
one-shot thing, I think. Yeah,
I'd have to give him a B because he could cut a promo, he could present. He was an excellent compliment to Billy and Chuck. He facilitated the wedding, the union or whatever it was. It led to one of the most memorable moments in WWE with Eric Bischoff tearing. Did you ask Eric about that, by the way? Tearing
no, but I'm having him back on early next year. I need to do it.
Terry, that was one of the best. You talk about WWE doing it the right way. My God. And Rico is right at the center of that. But Rico also could get himself over. So it was weird. Three guys that seemed to be not an identity between them when they did the Billy and Chuck. He was the stylist, but it was weird. So I give him a B because he made what could have been a complete and abject failure really entertaining and work. But he didn't get those guys over more than they would have gotten over on their own.
Next one. I think she's morphed sort of from a valet to a manager, I'd guess. Maria Kanellis.
I would say she's a nothing in WWE because she wasn't a manager. Her in ROH, I would probably still give a C because she did add an element to what they call the Kingdom, right? It was Matt Taven and Mike, her husband, Mike Bennett.
Sorry, Mike Bennett.
Mike Bennett. Just a C because the list once again hit the sound cue, Chris. The list, but she did really strong work, and what she did in ROH shows that WWE didn't use her to the maximum ability she had to be a character.
Johnny Polo.
This is a tough one, not because he's mad at me, but this is a tough one because he was with the Quebecers, which he did get them over and talk and do everything. But
didn't fit for me.
Didn't fit at all. You know what it was? The Quebecers were doing something in the background, and Johnny Polo has the polo doing all this, it was literally, look at me, don't look at them. So he was getting himself over. You know what? Get mad at me. He's a D.
Do you know what it is? He always felt like a Cornette ripoff because Cornette had the tennis racket, and then all of a sudden Johnny Polo's got to have every other sporting implement from the badminton racket to everything else.
I never could put my finger on it. You're exactly right. This is
because he was a rich boy.
Country Club North. He was the North. You know what? This could have been a Vince McMahon creation. We got the Southern Cornette. We'll get the Northern Johnny Polo. I never asked Scotty if he created the gimmick. My guess is he didn't because WWE creates all that stuff. So, hey, not as bad as Stevie Polo, but he's a D.
I don't know about that. Don Callis. Or you can do the Jackal or the later variation of Don Callis if you wish.
He's an A across the board. He's nowhere near the heel he is when he's on Twitter or podcast. I mean, he can be pretty vicious, but I'd say his charisma, his ability to think on his feet, his ability to pivot. I wouldn't give him an A because he does tend to not get talent over as much as himself.
As a manager, Harley Race.
Managing Vader and Lex Luger.
Yeah, he had quite a few charges. Barbarian, maybe?
Here's what I would give Harley a B. You know why? Because he legitimately was
teaching afterlife.
What's that? I don't want the ghost to beat the hell out of me. The ghost will come and stretch me, smack me as hard as he did Vader at the convention from a wheelchair. No, mind you. You hear that story?
No.
Yeah, I saw it. He was on a wheelchair. He just smacked Vader in the face. Like Vader was doing something and Harley got hot at him. Said, "Come here." They're like, oh my God.
Damn.
So with that being said, that's why I'm scared to give him a D. But he is a B for this reason. Because he legitimately, I think Lex talked about this and even Vader, he legitimately talked and taught them. I'm sorry, he talked too. He taught them how to be better workers. He was literally managing them to become better characters on TV.
dear God, he managed Mr. Hughes and Vinny Vegas as well.
I don't
Super
remember that.
Invader, Yoshi Kwan. Yeah, so
Oh,
not all hits.
Chris Champion is Yoshi Kwan.
And the Colossal Kongs.
I remember
if
that.
you remember them for 2 seconds. Right, we're nearly at the end
Death
of this, by
Row
the
might
way.
have been one of those guys from last week.
God, might as well have been. What a weird cast of people. He's gone from Van Vader and Luger to Yoshi Kwan. Anyway, never mind.
Well, you know what that is? I believe, this is my speculation, having Harley keep a job, giving him something to do. That's what it felt like.
Next one, Diamond Dallas Page. AWA, or I don't know if he managed in Florida, but or WCW in the early days.
I think he did start out doing something in Florida for Dusty before AWA, but I'm not sure if it was a manager. Because he was probably one of the greatest workers, especially starting late in his life. But as a manager, he tried to outshine the talent.
He's too tall for the talent.
He's a D. He's a D because of the elements I explained. And these are if Chris, can put up these parameters earlier, the parameters, and I'll give him the Chris, one of those things about being a compliment to the talent, getting the talent way more over, kind of almost have to actually blending into the background. And the Diamond Dallas Page, diamonds everywhere. It does not blend into the background.
Speaking of someone who absolutely blends into the background to the point that most people have probably forgotten about him, Clarence Mason.
I love the gimmick. The lawyer gimmick. That was cool. He could talk. I think they did like a Where Are They Now on him a few years ago on WWE.com.
Yeah, he's a real lawyer. Lives in Florida. I think he might even live in Tampa. Who knows?
Yeah, we might need him eventually if we keep talking about the subjects we talk about. I'd probably give him a C. Just because he could cut promos and he could do what he did, and he's a legitimate lawyer, which is great. But the longevity, he didn't have the longevity to be able to have a body of work.
Fonzie.
Hey. A guy that was so boisterous, loud, had a whistle, and you would say in every other thing I talked about, he would overshadow Sabu and Rob and whoever else. And he worked. And he had one of the bloodiest matches in ECW or wrestling history against a woman, Beulah. And they pulled time, and it was great. But he still got them over. This is a dude that has decades in the business at this point in his career, even way back 20, 30 years ago, and managed to get other talent over. And I think because he was a referee for so long, he understood not getting in the way and when to get in the way and when to talk. Plus, he was like real life friends with Rob and Sabu, so they could be honest, I think, with each other about we need to be here. That's a little bit too much. Yeah, and Sabu didn't even talk anyway, so you only had to go back and forth with Rob. Fonzie, dude, I'm telling you, he won't make it, but if a lot of the names weren't there, you know where I'd put him. Mount Rushmore.
Fonzie's got the same problem for me as Daphne with the screaming. At some point, it becomes a turn-off when it's just incessant noise over the match. And I think Fonzie's a great manager as well, but the constant whistling during matches drove me a bit crazy.
I think he tempered as time went on. You have to go too far and then peel it back a little bit.
We've only got a few names left. Missy Hyatt, the Walking Riot.
She's a girl. I talked about Sonny. This was a female manager that could get herself over to a point, but she did add to Eddie Gilbert. There was a whole thing with John Tatum in UWF, and then, basically turning on him to go with Eddie Gilbert, and then her WCW thing, becoming an interviewer, and then back and forth between doing stuff with Paul, the arm wrestling. WCW, her best work was UWF, as far as, and also world class. I'm sorry. She did a lot of great work there with John Tatum. I would put her in the B category. Not because people say she's a bitch, but because I know you were at your head. I saw the gears turning when I said B.
Well, it's just when you were giving some of the women D's, I was thinking,
She was on the level for those territories. I know what you're saying with the T. Stop it. Behave. Right there. So, but with that being said, as you would say, she was a pioneer. She was a trailblazer. You're talking about before Miss Elizabeth. You're talking about territories. You're talking about certain stereotypes that the promoters think should be featured on TV. They gave her the ball. She ran with it. And she got talents over.
Now, there are quite a few people, like Sunshine and Precious and people like that, which in my mind, I lump more in just valet categories. But with Missy Hyatt, I always felt was like more in the manager role. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 left. Kevin Sullivan.
He's an A.
He managed a lot of people.
He managed a lot of people. He's an A. You know what he is? He's the manager. You love this reference. We didn't get one in over 2.5 hours. And here comes your Simpsons reference. He's the dude standing like this. Even if he's managing everybody, that dude's still scary. That dude still could kick somebody's ass. But he got other talent over. It's weird whether he tagged with him, whether he talked for him, very weird. And he was a booker too, so he understood his place a little bit more. Dare I say it, he probably wrote the storylines and the promos and the angles he was involved with. He probably creatively knew where to be. So unfortunately, too, this list has a lot of rest in peace to him, and Kevin's definitely one of them.
Luscious Johnny V.
He fit with a lot of wrestlers. The worst fit was Demolition when they switched from him to Mr. Fuji. He's the one-dimensional grand wizard type. I'm not saying he's not over. Him and Jimmy as tag team were incredible. The Valiants. I would say this. He's probably, with the list, he's going to be a C. Very one-dimensional.
I actually liked him more as a commentator because he would talk normally, then he would legitimately get flustered, and then he would just start yelling to sort of just cover up for the fact that he made a mistake. And he'd do it all the time, but he was really amusing. I really liked him as a commentator.
You know who else was a good commentator? But he made one faux pas.
You're not going to say Johnny Polo, are you? Jesus.
No, he made a lot more than one. No, Billy Graham. He was the commentator, I believe, or it was Johnny Valiant. I think it was Billy Graham, was the commentator for when Honky Tonk Man lost the Intercontinental title at SummerSlam. And remember, he kind of like Bobby Heenan when he gave away the third man at Bash at the Beach with Hogan. He was almost giving it away and talking over. During the match, he goes, "Oh, this could be it right here. This could be over right now." Don't say that. It kind of gave away the finish that it was going to be a rout in like 20 seconds.
I didn't think he was that bad of a commentator.
No, that
he gets
moment.
a lot of hate.
No, that moment, I think. No, he was a good commentator.
No, I didn't think he was that bad at all, but I always heard, he was a terrible commentator. No, I've watched SummerSlam 88. I didn't think he did that bad of a job at all.
Just that moment of giving away he gave away the finish right, instead of reacting like, "Oh my God, I didn't think that," if he had said, "This dude had the Intercontinental title longer than anybody, and I couldn't believe it's over this quick," or "I've never seen a match this short." It could have been, it's hindsight 2020, dude.
3 more left. J.J. Dillon.
He's an A. This is a guy touching Mount Rushmore. He complimented the Four Horsemen. I don't think anybody could be the manager for the Four Horsemen besides J.J. Dillon. And he was a worker. He went to Japan. He understood. Referees and workers to become managers generally understand where they have to peel back and kind of like I said before, you have to be vulnerable. You have to know your place and get the talent over. And JJ did that. I loved when he pulled the shoe off and they would hit him and he'd be in the ropes. And that was my favorite JJ Dillon spot.
He was very good at, because obviously he was a wrestler, but he wrestled, when he did wrestle in the late years, he wrestled like a manager and he managed like a wrestler. And I think that's a great saying. It's like, as you would say, show your ass.
Yeah.
He was never afraid to do that. And he always looked, he looked out of shape. He probably wasn't out of shape in his 40s, with the later Four Horsemen.
He always had the belly.
He would wrestle. Yeah, he would wrestle like he was a complete bumbling fool when he wasn't.
He and Heenan were the best ones at doing that. They were both workers. The thing, and Heenan could have been the next Ray Stevens. He had very much a Ray Stevens type of bumping and moving around. With JJ, he was maybe, if I can remember correctly, because this is during the era of Paul Jones and other people yelling and screaming.
I didn't even put Paul Jones.
That's why I said it. The pointing and screaming, and let me tell you something, brother. JJ would, you can do the JJ. JJ Dillon would talk, fold his arms, put the glasses in his mouth, and talk. It was almost like he was their lawyer or agent. He was the first manager to just talk and put them over from, like he was representing a client. That's what I loved about JJ. And Paul Jones, let's get to Paul Jones. So JJ's an A. Touching Mount Rushmore, so circle it. Paul Jones, former worker, and then worked after he managed later in his years in North Carolina. Paul Jones, this is what I loved about NWA. And I became a wrestling fan by watching NWA one morning, Channel 17, Philadelphia, Saturday morning. My first exposure to pro wrestling was NWA, which resembled ECW at the time, before ECW. 3/4 overhead Diablo shot, no commentary sometimes, just laid out. And Paul Jones and his army were trying to shave the head of handsome Jimmy Valiant. And I was like, and Paul Jones looked like the most evil Bond villain type genius. And he was just there was different types of flavors, or there was different presentation. Everybody had their own little niche on the show. J.J. Dillon and the Four Horsemen was the clean cut professional heels that like a big money contract baseball player. Then you had like the alley fight, underground MMA, like deep down dirty style that Paul Jones and Jimmy Valiant feud, and Pez Wadley was a babyface, and Paul Jones turned him. He became the heel. What was he called? Shaka. He went from Pistol Pez to, he renamed him.
Shasta? Or
Shasta Wadley.
Yeah.
Shasta Wadley.
Yeah.
That's what I loved about NWA. It was a variety show. It was a circus. Paul Jones, I would put him in a C because of the list, and he was one-dimensional. But he could cut a promo, and he could get the talent over.
Now, you mentioned J.J. Dillon being Mount Rushmore quality. Let's go to the opposite now, the Mariana Trench of bad managers, the coach, John Tolos.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Jonathan Coachman. The coach, John Tolos, who was an excellent worker for his time, managed Mr. Perfect in the first, like the enhancement era of Mr. Perfect when he first came in. The coach, right?
Mm-hmm.
He
replaced Bobby Heenan, I think. Or did he replace Bobby?
No, Bobby Heenan might have replaced him.
Excuse me.
I would put him in a D. And if there was an E, I would put him in an E.
And the last one on the list, although I'm trying to find the name of one more who definitely needs to be included, but I can't remember his name. But we'll end on this if I can't. Baby Doll.
You know, it's funny with Baby Doll, because usually the manager has to talk to get the talent over. Tully did all the talking. Dusty did all the talking. Was she with Zbyszko for a short time? Zbyszko did all the talking.
Very short time, yeah.
Western States era. Western States Heritage title era. Baby Doll got the talent over by not talking. It's the strangest exception. I would give her probably around the C, the upper C, because she did get them over, but she didn't do what any of the tools a manager would get them over with. They got themselves over, and she accentuated the gimmick rather than getting them over. It really, a lot of nuance with some of these names. And by the way, all these people, most of them to a degree, are legends within the business. So this is when we're talking about B and above, it's high altitude stuff that you're talking about. So even at D, the only one I would say, John Tolos didn't fit the bill because he was a worker. He was a Freddie Blassie type worker, very vicious. But he only had like a month as a manager. If that, he worked like a set of tapings and that was it.
Basically. There's two more people I've remembered. One of them I loved, The Wizard. If you remember him, he was the original manager of
welcome to
Carl in
Oz, welcome to
WWF.
Oz, welcome to Oz, and had the monkey on his shoulder, right?
Yeah, he
WCW.
eventually would be. No, in WWF, he managed Kamala and a few other people.
Oh, Curtis Iakea in the Dungeon of Doom. Oh,
yeah.
This water is not cold. This water is hot, Hogan would say. No,
Amazing.
That was King Curtis Iakea, who was in WWE for a time.
Yeah, he managed Kamala. I can't remember who else he managed. I think he managed after the Wild Samoan when he was a single.
There was some beast within that time frame.
Yeah.
Where would I put him? I probably have to put him in a C just because body of work. He worked a lot in Florida, didn't he? He was a big time manager in Florida. That's why he got the WCW connection with Kevin Sullivan and all those people.
Yeah, with Mark Loon especially. They were a double act for quite a while, always trying to take over those territories, let me tell you. There's one more, though, I wanted to bring. Oh, sorry. So we've given Curtis Ikea a C. Baby Doll, did we give a grade to?
Let's see. High C.
High C.
Like I said, with the context that if you're in a C, you're still legendary in one way or another.
So we're going to name our Mount Rushmore. So we have the names that you asked me to circle. Jim Cornette, Miss Elizabeth, Paul Bearer, Sensational Sherry, Jimmy Hart, Bobby the Brain Heenan, and JJ Dillon. So that's what, 7, 8 names there. So if you could only name 4, who was the Mount Rushmore?
Could you go take it one by one for me, just so I could say, because I have the entire, I should have taken notes too. I'm sorry.
Jim Cornette.
Yes.
Definitely on.
Yes.
Miss Elizabeth.
Yes.
Interesting. Where are we next? Paul Bearer.
Yes.
You're just going to say yes for all 7 of these, or
no? I gotta leave people out now because these 3 people were absolutely integral in getting wrestlers that could have been just drab nothing and making them legends and making them champions and making them perennial characters on shows. And Miss Elizabeth, for example, it's tough because Sherry's going to have to be left off compared to that because you do not talk about Randy Savage without Elizabeth. You do not talk about any of these wrestlers or wrestling in general and managers without Jim Cornette. And the other one is Paul Bearer. There is no Undertaker in this legendary status without Paul Bearer.
So Sherry was saying no.
Yeah.
Jimmy Hart.
What are the remaining names? So we have Sherry, Jimmy Hart,
Bobby Heenan, and JJ Dillon.
Bobby Heenan is the Mount Rushmore. The others got to be left off.
So we've got Jim Cornette, Bobby Heenan, we've got Miss Elizabeth, and we have Paul Bearer. So they are the S tier. They are the Mount Rushmore of the greatest managers in wrestling history. But if you had to pick one, who would it be?
Heenan.
How could it not be?
Yeah. So what we have now is these are the greatest of the greatest. We're talking about the greatest managers that have come along in wrestling. Some of the greatest managers. We've given them marks, but all these people deserve to be mentioned in the conversation. But these are the absolute greatest professional wrestling managers amongst the greatest. So that is the Mount Rushmore.
A fine Mount Rushmore, a fine 3-part.
But I wasn't going to do
episode.
Heenan just to piss you off, but Heenan's in.
I would have been agog, if you like that word. I would have been mouth agape if you hadn't said Bobby Heenan. I mean, if you said Cornette, I would have got it. But the only thing with Cornette is, and you tell me if you think I'm right or wrong about this, is Cornette can never be considered the greatest manager of all time for one single reason, is that I always thought he never had the pizzazz. He never had the sort of like Hollywood superstar thing going for him that maybe a Bobby Heenan did. Bobby Heenan would be large. He carried himself more like a superstar and was the glitz and the glamour and everything of the greatest or one of the greatest eras of pro wrestling. Cornette to me was always more of a regional hit. He was always a bit more not down market, but he dressed down on purpose and that kind of thing. That he always had that missing from his game, I guess.
Yeah, but you would dare say the reason why Cornette could be considered to be up there is because once again, Yokozuna got over even more by having Jim Cornette. You can talk about Fuji for window dressing and just wearing the robe and everything. It was Cornette that got him over. And also Cornette was managing meaning Yokozuna and Owen Hart as well. So he's up there because one of the greatest promos ever. If he could have adjusted or evolved a little bit into that WWE stage, he would be even greater. But he's definitely up there on the Mount Rushmore. And I would say, there's managers today, if they do ever bring them back, those are the four, male or female, that you need to look at for Cornette for the over-the-top promos, for Elizabeth of doing a lot by doing very little, maximizing what you do. Then we have, who's there? I know Bobby, but who's the third one again? I'm sorry.
Cornette, Elizabeth, Paul Bearer.
Paul Bearer, surrendering your entire identity to complement that guy while cutting promos and while going back and forth between babyface and heel with the same character with a different twist and getting the enemy over and doing that. Paul Bearer with an urn and The Undertaker, if you looked at that on paper, you would say, that's too on the nose. That's parody, right? But because of the players in it, him and Mark made it work. And I dare say he made it work even more, and Taker would probably agree. Bobby Heenan just goes with probably a mix of all of them. Loudmouth jerk, over-the-top dress with the Hollywood type thing, chicken shit heel, as we would say, a coward, and also almost like a sports agent. Like he morphed everything into one. That's why Bobby is the absolute greatest manager that will ever, not just in the past, that will ever be seen in pro wrestling.